Formless sacred seal bestowed by the Maiden of the Three Fingers, enhancing incantations of the Frenzied Flame. The seal is the mark of the Lord of Frenzied Flame, scaling incantations using one's strength, dexterity, intelligence, and faith all together. The Frenzied Flame is considered to be one of the greatest heretical practices and is feared even by those who would oppose the Golden Order and its hierarchy. Deemed so detestable in nature, its source has been sealed below ground, awaiting the arrival of its true lord. Irina is a blind character wearing a ribbon over her eyes and a dirty dress stained with blood. She can be encountered just beyond the Bridge of Sacrifice on the Weeping Peninsula side. Irina warns you about a rebellion in Castle Morn and asks you to deliver a letter to her father, commander of the castle forces. Irina wears what I believe is the prophet blindfold, a blindfold of exiled prophets who foretold misfortune and were persecuted and driven from their homes as a result. Why hesitate if the path leading to the future is clear? Just close your eyes and walk. This is quite interesting given her questline, as she later is taken over by a spirit named Hieta who seeks the distant light. After exhausting her dialogue, she gives us her letter, a letter written by Irina addressed to her father, the commander of Castle Morn. Gorgeous silken handkerchief lightly stained with blood. Words can be made out within. Traveling to Castle Morn at the very southern tip of the Weeping Peninsula, we find Edgar at the top of a tower sitting down looking exhausted. He tells us of what's happening in the castle, and when we give him the letter, he asks that we tell her that he's coming the next time we see her. We can then make our way to the Lion and Misbegotten, and when we defeat it, it drops the grafted blade greatsword, the storied sword of Castle Morn, a revenger's weapon. It is burdened with oceans of anger and regret. One of the legendary armaments. A lone surviving champion from a country now vanished was so determined to continue fighting that he claimed the swords of an entire clan of warriors. When we return to Edgar to tell him of our success, he says that he is no longer bound to stay here and goes to rescue his daughter and spend his remaining days with her. When we return to Irina, we find her murdered, apparently by some of the Misbegotten, as an iron cleaver is seen next to her body. Edgar is also next to her, weeping and swearing revenge on the ones who murdered his daughter. When we reach Liurnia after defeating Godric, we run into Lightseeker Hieta on the lake-facing cliffs. Hieta is a mysterious blind woman who roams the lands between, following the guidance of the distant light. She seeks to become a finger maiden upon reaching this distant light. Hieta asks that we give her Shabriri grapes, yellowing, oozing eyeballs of the infirm. The surface is shriveled and the inside is squishy, not unlike a large, overly ripe grape. Give to the blind maiden to guide her to the distant light. We find one of these in Stormvale Castle by a spirit. When we give it to her, she thanks us and says she can feel the distant light in the back of her eyes once again, and then teaches us the as you wish gesture. We run into Edgar once again at the Revenger's shack. He's apparently gone mad with revenge and attacks us when he invades. Upon defeat, he drops the Banished Knight halberd, a finely crafted halberd intricately engraved with an ancient motif, given to knights who, whether by misfortune or misdeed, were forced to abandon their homes. Most of these knights were sent to the fringes, where they were forced to start anew with only despair for company. And a Shabriri grape. We can take this grape to Hieta, who is now at the Purified Ruins. After giving her these Shabriri grapes, she says that we are not like the others, as they lay their trembling hands upon her, howling wordlessly, and gently stroke her eyes, their frail fingers emaciated, and they still give her grapes. She says that we are most kind. Oddly enough, I believe these people she speaks of are those afflicted by the Frenzied Flame, and they are quite literally feeding her their eyes. Yet she does not know this, as she asks us what they are when we give her another at the Gatetown Bridge. And when we tell her that they are the eyes of those afflicted, she vomits. When we speak with her again, she comes to the conclusion that the distant light is far and frail, and that it can't be seen by the naked eye. But with everyone's together, it appears, stating she is certain to become a finger maiden. We then meet her at the Bellum Church, where she asks if we've heard of something called a fingerprint grape, a special grape that is grown only by those embraced by the burnt fingers. She says that she would like to try one and that the distant light seems far closer than before, and that she can't sense a thing with the usual Shabriri grapes, asking us if we could find one. It's at this point we must find the man known as Vike. Towards the exit of the Frenzied Flame village just before the Church of Inhibition, we're invaded by festering fingerprint Vike. He wears the fingerprint set, iron armor singed and blistered by fingers, worn by Vike, Knight of the Round Table Hold. No, the Tarnished was closer to the throne of the Elden Lord than Vike, but without announcement, Vike traveled far below the capital and was scorched by the flame of frenzy. Did he make his choice for his maiden, or did some other force lure him with suggestion? He wields a war spear singed and blistered by fingers used by Vike, Knight of the Round Table Hold. Like Vike himself, it has been tormented by the yellow flame of frenzy from within. When we defeat him, he drops his spear and the fingerprint grape, eyeball of the Knight Vike, inflamed yellow, seared with a repulsive fingerprint burn akin to those that marred his entire body. If offered to the blind maiden, it will lead her to the source of the distant light, allowing her to become a finger maiden. Vike was once a proud warrior and servant of the Golden Order and closest with the dragon worshippers cult who resided in the capital. He even created his own incantation that used ancient dragon's lightning. Of all the knights, Vike the Dragon Spear was the one Lansax loved the most. When we return to Hieta at the Bellum Church in Liurnia, she seems quite excited to receive this fingerprint grape, saying how it is a wondrous thing, how sweet it is, and how it burns. She then thanks us and says she's sure she'll become a finger maiden. After making our way through the capital and gaining access to the subterranean shutting grounds, we can make our way down to the very depths and find a chamber with a false Diaz that can be hit to reveal the path down to the Frenzied Flame prescription. It is here that we find Hieta again. She says that she is surely to be a maiden and us a lord, telling us to divest ourselves of all of our possessions and to go down to the door down the corridor next to her. The Three Fingers will surely welcome us, and may the flame of chaos find purchase within our bodies. After inheriting the frenzied flame, we speak with her again. She asks us to rest our hand upon her and to burn her with the flame. After burning her with the flame, she says her eyes are melting away and that she has touched the words of the Three Fingers. All that there is came from the one great, then came fractures and births and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so what was borrowed must be returned. Melt it all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again. After this, she seems to pass away and we receive the frenzied flame seal. Formless sacred seal bestowed by the Maiden of the Three Fingers. Enhancing incantations of the Frenzied Flame, this seal is the mark of the Lord of the Frenzied Flame. Scaling incantations using strength, dexterity, intelligence, and faith all together. She also drops 5 Frenzied Flame stones. The Nomads are a tribe that was entombed in the earth so as to bury the maddening disease that followed them. Able to emit the terrible flame of frenzy from their eyes, they are weak and frail, unable to take much in the way of punishment. We can find these nomads below the capital leading down to the frenzied flame prescription. We can also find these nomads as merchants all over the lands between. Merchant Kale is one of these merchants, and we can speak with him to get some information about his people. He says that we are a tarnished and he can see it, and he can also see that we're not after his throat. When we ask about who he is, he says that he is of a nomadic people, selling wares as he travels. The land has been tainted by madness since the shattering of the Elden Ring, and that it's tarnished like us that keep things from drying up entirely, so we are very welcome customers. He continues by saying there are other of his people who yet survive in these lands. If the mood takes us when we meet one, then offer them some trade. His people, wanderers all, have long been spurned by the grace of gold, which is why they cannot settle, but instead are forced into this pitiful, unceasing journey. But thanks to that, things are not so different for them now, though the Elden Ring is shattered. He thinks this makes us kindred spirits of sorts, our people, the Tarnished, and his. Perhaps we don't need to hear this, but see that no harm comes to his kin. They have a saying, him and the other wanderers, lament not your solitude. Expect no sympathy, no regard, nothing. But if anyone dares harm us, show them no mercy. That is their code, so to speak. just the way that they are, deeply unforgiving. We can ask him about the howling in Mistwood, to which he tells us that we have nothing to fear and teaches us the finger snap gesture. After this, we can return to Mistwood and meet Blythe. Then when we speak to Kale again, he says that Blythe is boorish, blunt, and couldn't find his nose with both hands, but he's a good egg, and we are sure to find the best in each other. One last piece of dialogue I'd like to discuss is the line where he seems a bit confused and asks, "Wait, weren't you?" then says, "Well, we're back," and asks if we care to buy something. I ponder this line quite often, as it feels suggestive of him having some sort of information about us that he isn't supposed to discuss. His relationship to Blythe could be a route of exploration, but we have no real knowledge of them outside of the interaction and lines of dialogue they say to us. Perhaps there is something going on with the merchants above ground having a sort of network, and they relay our whereabouts to one another. Or there's possibly some other entity keeping tabs on us entirely. Quite strange, and perhaps we'll get follow-up in the upcoming DLC. These merchants above ground all wear different variations of the nomadic merchant set, which we can find below the capital just before the Frenzied Flame prescription. Finery of the nomadic merchants, decorated with tiny gems in a wide spectrum of colors. These merchants once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being accused of heretical beliefs, their entire clan was rounded up and buried alive far underground. Then they chanted a curse of despair and summoned the flame of frenzy. It is rumored that the one who caused this event is the one known as Shibriri, but I will discuss this entity in a bit. From these merchants, we can purchase notes that lead to areas that would be undiscovered by the common tarnished. Two particular notes that stick out are the Frenzied Flame Village note. South of the Grand Lift of Dectus lies the Frenzied Flame Village, inhabited by the sick, stay well away, and the Lord of Frenzied Flame note. Beneath Lane Dell at the very bottom lies our Lord, Lord of the Frenzied, the three fingers who holds us in thrall. During our travels, we can find the location of the first note, the Frenzied Flame Village. I covered this location in a previous video, so go check that out. In short, when we arrive at the village, we can see the effects of the Frenzied Flame on the population that inhabits this area. The locals, town guard, and even the wildlife are all afflicted with the Frenzied Flame. Towards the entrance, we can find a nomad who has passed away, which leads me to believe that this nomad was likely the cause of the spread in this village. And towards the back at the Church of Inhibition, we're invaded by the previously discussed Vike, who was also consumed by the Frenzied Flame, and was rumored to be chosen as the Lord of the Flame, but fell from the site of lordship from the Three Fingers shortly after. We can also find the Ailing Village, which I also discussed in a previous video, afflicted similarly. And here we find the Flamecrest wooden shield, a tall, medium-sized wooden shield, light for its size and easy to handle, carried by soldiers of the village that is afflicted by frenzy. The yellow flame is the symbol of the affliction, serving as a warning to those who might approach the village. I theorize that this shield signifies that the village knew of the oncoming frenzied flame, and while they retained some semblance of sanity, they came up with a way to ward off anyone coming to the village so others would not come to be consumed by the affliction. In these areas, we can find yellow amber, an ember taken from an eye socket of a corpse, a sign that the deceased suffered from the flame of frenzy. This grape has ripened and burst. From experience, we can tell that these are Shibriri grapes that have, as described, ripened to bursting. Eye of Yellow is a shrub fruit bursting with ripened pulp. Grown in lands afflicted by frenzy, it's used for its pain-relieving properties, though it's also known to be a dangerous intoxicant. This to me means that although it's used for pain relief, it comes at the cost of deepening the madness of the frenzied flame after use. Frenzy Flame stones are ruin fragments blessed with an incantation of the Three Fingers, using FP to generate warmth, continuously restoring the HP of those who host the Frenzied Flame. Confers madness upon those who have not adopted the flame. Take care not to mistake this for its gentler cousin. This gentler cousin is the warming stone used by those who aren't affected by the frenzied flame. The three fingers are an entity similar to the two fingers smoldering with the frenzied flame, awaiting the Lord who will inherit it. They are far below the capital and can only be encountered when one divests themselves of all possessions. I don't quite know why the fingers disappear after you inherit the flame, but it's quite possibly of no significance, or merely you absorb them when you inherit the flame. To uncover a bit more, we can look to the incantations of the Frenzied Flame. The Flame of Frenzy is an incantation originating from the maddening three fingers, causes the yellow flame of frenzy to burst forth from the caster's eyes. The Flame of Frenzy deals damage and causes buildup of madness. This incantation also causes buildup of madness in the caster and is only effective against Tarnished. The Frenzied Burst releases concentrated blasts of the yellow flame of frenzy from the caster's eyes. In times past, every single person who attempted to control the Flame of Frenzy succumbed to madness after a desperate internal struggle. This incantation is testament to a meager victory. An inescapable frenzy causes the yellow flame of frenzy to blaze from the caster's eyes. The caster then latches onto foes, spreading the madness. This incantation also causes buildup of madness, and is only effective against Tarnish. To gaze into one another's eyes is truly the most intimate form of human contact. An unendurable frenzy causes the yellow flame of frenzy to violently burst forth from the caster's eyes. Hold to continue channeling the flame. This incantation can be used while in motion. It is the maddening pain and unstoppable tears of those afflicted with the flame of frenzy brought into being. The Fingerprint Stone Shield is a great stone shield with an intricately carved fingerprint design, one of the heaviest of all great shields. Part of the tomb of an ancient god, the readerless fingers relayed their message through these imprints, said to be the very seeds from which frenzy first sprouted. One constant theme in these descriptions is that the flame comes from the eyes and is only effective on Tarnished. I would assume that the frenzied flame can be called upon in a moment of desperation, and the fact that it only affects Tarnished, which in my opinion is quite confusing as we see multiple species afflicted by it, means that it was possibly born from the Tarnished losing their grace. This is supported by the Three Fingers' direct opposition to grace and the Golden Order, and Marika taking the grace away from the warriors who once inhabited the land. I would say that this even happened before the Grand Caravan being moved below the capital, which would also mean that it existed before the merchants entered the lands between. But since it also only affects Tarnished in terms of item description and dialogue, it's quite possible that this was a weapon made to combat the Tarnished returning. And in realizing it was out of control, the one who created it that we know as an ancient god in the shield's description, who I would speculate without much evidence is the One Great, who I also believe is depicted with the statues we see across the lands between with a long beard holding tablets sealed it away. And now the frenzied flame seeks to escape and destroy any and everything. Shabriri can be found in the mountaintops of the giants and has obtained Yura's body as a vessel for him to exist once again in the lands between. When spoken to, he says, "Finally we meet, the Tarnished who would be Lord. Oh my, why the long face? I fear that you were previously acquainted with this vessel. Well, that is most unfortunate, for he is dead. As for his flesh, he gave it to me, Shabriri. I hope you can make your peace with that. You are about to sacrifice something precious, the life of a fair maiden, that you would toss into the fiery forge, only so that you may be Lord. What a horrible thing to ponder. Your ascendancy requires her sacrifice whether she wishes it or not. But how would the Lord, crowned so, be looked upon? Chosen Tarnished and would be Lord. Dare to tread the path of true rigor. Spare the poor girl and singe your own flesh in her stead. If you are prepared to show resolve and attain lordship through righteous hardship, then heed the words of I, Shabriri. Descend into the depths far below. The Erdtree capital, seek audience with the Three Fingers and the Flame of Frenzy. If you inherit the Flame of Frenzy, your flesh will serve as kindling and the girl can be spared, setting you on the righteous path of lordship, the path of the Lord of Chaos." Burn the Erd tree to the ground and incinerate all that divides and distinguishes. May chaos take the world. An interesting line of dialogue he says upon death is, Shabriri is chaos incarnate. I cannot die. May chaos take the world. What this could mean is that Shabriri was originally chosen as the Lord of Frenzied Flame, but failed, yet it still dwells within him, or that he is a naturally chaotic being with immortality. Shabriri's woe is the disturbing likeness of a man whose eyes have been gouged out. The corners of his mouth are upturned in an almost flirtatious manner, constantly attracting enemies' aggression. It is said that the man named Shabriri had his eyes gouged out as punishment for the crime of slander, and with time, the blight of the flame of frenzy came to dwell in the empty sockets. It's theorized that Shabriri's crime of slander was that which put the Grand Caravan below the capital, meaning that after the Golden Order realized the merchants had done nothing wrong, he was convicted and punished for this crime, which eventually led to him being inhabited by the Frenzied Flame. The Howl of Shabriri is an incantation originating from the maddening Three Fingers, releases a maddening shriek that causes madness buildup in foes nearby. This incantation also causes madness buildup in the caster and makes enemies more likely to target them. It is said that the sickness of the Flame of Frenzy began with Shabriri, the most reviled man in all of history. If we take this literally, then the theories I discussed earlier are surely up for debate, but this incantation originates from the Three Fingers, meaning that Shabriri was possibly the first to be afflicted, but the flame existed before he was, and he simply spread his sickness himself. In order to subvert the frenzied flame from engulfing the lands between, we must use Miquella's needle, one of the unalloyed gold needles that Miquella crafted to ward away the meddling of outer gods, capable of subduing the flame of frenzy if inherited, allowing one to cheat fate and avoid becoming Lord of Frenzied Flame. However, the needle is as yet unfinished and can only be used in the heart of the storm beyond time, said to be found in Farum Azula. What's strange is that this description says it's capable of subduing the frenzied flame specifically, but nothing else, so it was only useful to Millennia for warding the rot off, not subduing it as she blooms into the rot goddess. I believe Miquella was aware that a Tarnished would want to save his maiden and inherit the flame, so he made sure that the Tarnished would acquire this needle somehow by bizarre chance, so as to not melt everything into one. Much is unclear about this item's true utility aside from the description and why it says it would specifically subdue the frenzied flame and only ward off outer god meddling. But we do have the DLC coming soon, so perhaps we'll have answers then. If you made it to the end of this video, you have my thanks. We unpacked a lot here today, and I felt more comfortable discussing some of my own theory this time around, as the Frenzied Flame is very shallow in terms of true and present lore. I'm officially back from my short break, and I'm going to try to be a little more articulate with my videos henceforth. And I'll also be doing game playthroughs so as to give myself more time for my lore and theory videos, so I hope you guys enjoy what's to come. I'd also like to thank Dim for helping me sort through the aspects and such of the video's topic. Subscribe if you're new or returning, as it would greatly aid the channel with the algorithm. Like the video and comment your thoughts. The Discord server is linked in the description, so feel free to join and chat it up with me in there. I'm Javelin, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.